Okay, first podcast of the season. Microphone, recording, candles burning, incense smoking, portal to the netherworld opening. Nice. Already. Not now, Satan. I have a podcast to record. Oh, geez. Was that my stomach? Wow, yeah, I'm starving. Sorry, Satan, my bad. We're still on for squash on Sunday, right? Where is Buckley with the food?
Heyo!
Buckley, where have you been?
Trick or eat?
Eat! I am starving.
Stomach or Satan?
Stomach, I think.
Well, that's a good thing because I didn't have time to cook tonight, so I've been out and got us some Chinese food.
Oh, man. It's Monday. I thought you were cooking tonight. I was looking forward to that.
Don't worry about it. Tell me, Hine, how can 1 billion Chinese people be wrong?
You make a good argument. All right, so what you got?
How about some rice?
Yeah, hand it over.
How are those maggots?
Huh?
Maggots, Hine. You're eating maggots. How do they taste? Sorry about that. No hard feelings, huh?
No.
Listen, why don't you try some noodles?
Cool, yeah, I love noodles. Pass them over here. Hold on. They're worms.
What worms? They're only noodles, Hine.
All right. You've had your fun. Well done. I'm not hungry now.
Oh, come on. I'm only messing with you. Here, I got you some of your favourite Aldi tofu.
All right, okay, well, I do love Aldi tofu. Okay, you got me. Pass it over here.
It's wet cardboard, Hine. You're eating wet cardboard.
Oh, man, you should be ashamed. I was really hungry too. You gone and spoiled it now.
All right. Don't worry. Listen, for real, look what I've got here.
Peanut butter. With a teaspoon. You son of a bitch, you know me too well. You know I can't resist the lure of the Peanut King. Pass it over.
Ha!
What?
Dog shit, Hine. You're eating dog shit.
We don't have time for this. We got a podcast to record. Oh, and there's our guest now. Vayse is filmed before a live studio audience.
Vayse is a production of Peanut King Productions. Copyright 1993. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Vayse, a podcast about weird stuff. I'm Peter C. Hine, and joining me as always is my very, very old friend and co-host. He's someone that I know is incapable of taking a good long look at himself in the mirror. He absolutely refuses to make hay or, in fact, do anything else whilst the sun is shining. He claims to be a vegetarian, but I have it on good authority that he's not. He just doesn't like steaks. And he's absolutely not welcome round my house. Let that stay on the record. Sorry. It's not normally this difficult. So, all that is to say that the man really, truly does suck. Alone in a darkened room. The Count. Count Stephen James Buckley.
Welcome to Vayse, Season 4.
Sorry.
A very serious podcast.
Yes. So, welcome to season 4. And it's off to a cracking start already. I think we should just get straight on with this because we're not doing very well so far. So I'm very, very excited about tonight's guest. She's a film critic, a reader in film studies and American studies, founding member of the Manchester Centre for Gothic Studies, co-director of Popular Screen Cultures Research Network at Manchester Met. She is the author of books such as The Postmodern Vampires, Films, Fiction and Popular Culture, which was the winner of the Lord Ruthven Prize for Vampire Nonfiction. She's the editor of Clive Barker, Dark Imaginer, and also 20th Century Gothic and Edinburgh Companion, Visions of the Vampire, 2 Centuries of Immortal Tales, and amazingly, The Worlds of Back to the Future, critical essays on the films. It is Dr. Sorcha Ní Fhlainn.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you
How
guys?
did I do at pronouncing your name?
Absolutely perfect. Top marks.
I was practicing for people that we didn't record that bit, but I had Sorcha tell me how her name was pronounced because when you see it written down, I had absolutely no idea.
Doesn't look the way it's spelled, the way it sounds. I always said to people, don't panic. It's all right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. God help you with the cardboard.
It was like the thing is I love tofu, and you know, like, and I love peanut butter. I mean, like I can take a leap Chinese, you know, that I'm not too bothered, but the tofu and the peanut butter that really hurt.
Yeah,
that was.
I have got a real strong affection for noodles. Nothing to do with what we're going to talk about tonight, but yeah, I do have a strong affection for noodles.
For me, peanut butter, tofu, and noodles all combined is.
Ooh, that could actually be quite lovely.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's one of my.
We're halfway through a pad thai there. I can just tell.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's one of my staples.
Oh, amazing.
It's great, isn't it, when we get a guest and we have one specific thing we're going to talk about, and then we just end up having loads in common with them, and we just want to talk to them about
we
all
don't
of
talk
the
to them
other
about the thing that we're meant to be talking to them about.
That could happen. Anything could happen.
And
lads.
we welcome it. We welcome it.
Yes.
Excellent.
I think it's known as a conversation.
Yes,
I think that's
having
what,
a conversation.
Yeah, like normal people.
I hear people do that now.
Yeah, I think I've seen it, or maybe heard it once or twice. Yeah. But this is the Halloween episode. I was noticing, Buckley, that our series start later and later every season, don't they? Mm-hmm. So like this is the first episode. It's also the Halloween episode, and tonight the reason that we've got Sorcha on is that incredibly she seems to be a doctor in vampire fiction, and that kind of gave us an idea for covering one of our favourite movies of absolutely all time. I know that Buckley was there the first time I saw this when I was about 16 at a mutual friend's house. So I don't know how many times I've watched this movie. That
was my first time as well. I didn't know that was your first time.
Ah, yeah, it was.
I assumed you were already familiar with it.
No, that was the first time as well. The film is, of course, people will probably know from the intro. In the intro, is Lost Boys, and if anyone's listening now, I know the film is like 37 years old now, but there's going to be spoilers. Like I think from the very beginning.
To be honest, if you've not seen The Lost Boys, you don't really deserve to be listening to our podcast. I think it's just like...
just pause now, have a cup of tea, we'll be here.
Yeah.
Resume afterwards.
It's only an hour and a half, isn't it? It's very
it's 90 minutes of your life.
It's lean. It's
when the 90-minute movie was like just absolutely right. You know what I mean? There was no fat on it, no extra. Just in you get, good story, and out you go at the end. And you leave with a smile on your face.
And interestingly, the film that I was thinking of as I watched it this time, in terms of how tightly structured it was actually Back to the Future. Yeah. Because that also just like, you know, like say with Lost Boys, after 13 minutes, you've met every single one of the major characters and you're off to the races. And it's kind of like that with Back to the Future, you know, like because every little thing all the way through just builds up to add to the plot. So even from the very beginning, when Marty McFly kind of goes to Doc's house, it kind of sets up the whole thing that Doc's away, Marty's good friends with him, and then he immediately goes and meets his girlfriend, sees his dad, sees Biff, like the whole family, and you're basically done, you know, like in Lost Boys, like absolutely works
25
like
minutes, you've got complete setup of everything, and you're into pretty much you're going to start into the second act, you're going towards the second act of the film.
Incredible. And that is incredible because like the discipline that you have to be able to write like that.
That's true.
You know,
that's true. That's why it took them a while. It took them many years to refine that script. That's why it works so well.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Also, like the opening, like the introduction to each character is absolutely amazing. Like particularly when you first see Kiefer Sutherland, that is the coolest intro of a character ever. Like when it sort of pans towards him and it's like he's walking through the crowds and stuff, and it's just like, fuck, has anyone ever looked that cool on screen?
I very 20 much years of age.
Cool. Wasn't he really young when he made it? And he pretended.
I think he was 19 when he shot it. He was very, very young. He'd just done Stand By Me before that, really, and so this was his first sort of big feature, and of course he gets his face all over the artwork as well, so it's kind of works kind of well. Iconic. He's so memorable for a supporting character, really. He's so memorable.
He barely has any lines, does he?
And most of those are Michael,
which is
most of them is Michael. Michael says like 100 times in the film. There's a supercut somewhere on YouTube. Someone judged me ages back, I think my husband did, and it was just like everyone just saying Michael, and it still works. I don't,
Who wants to know?
Who wants to know? Michael wants to know. Yeah.
How many different ways can you say Michael? Because on some of them he's like Michael.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes it's very sexy, and other times it's very sort of spat out like an insult. Yeah, so
I think it's always sexy. It's always
sexy. Well, Jason Patrick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I found out the other day? Jason Patrick is actually the son of
I knew you were going to say that.
The guy off The Exorcist.
And the grandson of Jackie Gleason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's mad that
what's incredible about like Jason Patrick, because like he's a little bit wooden in terms of his acting, I think, but like he has a masculine presence but also has like a feminine prettiness to him. He's got that very sort of masculine sort of almost like Jim Morrison
features, beautiful
cheekbones.
That was the 80s, man.
That was it. And great hair, let's not lie, great hair. There's that beautiful cross dissolve in the film where he's kind of being tempted to becoming a vampire, drinking the from the bottle and all that. And there's this gorgeous cross dissolve where you see his face and Jim Morrison's face kind of meet overlap. And it's this lovely image that always stays with me, and it's like he's so close to what Jim Morrison, looked like on that Doors cover. So
and it's so like, I mean, there's so many bits in that film that are really kind of moody and atmospheric and a sort of very like I don't know how to describe it, but like that scene that you're describing is one of the best examples of it, when you've got the music coming on, I'm not going to sing it, but it's
Cry Little Sister. It's it's Jerry McMahon's one,
and like but it's like an instrumental version of it. You can just hear like the intro to it, and with the kind of and it's like it's really like got that like woozy sort of like
it's late 80s synth at its finest.
Great example of it too.
So good. I mean, God, we all just love this film, don't we?
Yeah.
It's really, really
and I
like it.
love the soundtrack of this film.
The soundtrack's brilliant.
Yeah.
You can whack it on and be happy for hours listening to it. It's great,
I do. It's my go-to when I need cheering up, It's got that. Yeah.
There's one particular act on the soundtrack that we'll save for later in the podcast that we want to discuss. I think we all know who that's going to be.
Yes, we do.
But we'll save him for later.
Tremendously cool. Yeah, tremendously cool.
Yeah. Talking of supercuts, though. But before we delve into the sumptuous folds of the Lost Boys, let's just talk a little bit about Sorcha. So. You're born in Ireland, but you live in Britain now. Is that right? Yes.
That's right,
and you teach at Manchester Met.
That's right, yes. So I'm an associate professor, so researcher in Gothic studies, film studies, American studies at Manchester Metropolitan University. Yeah, so
I'm an alumni of, so I did my two postgrads were at Man Met, and so I've got a special effect. It's like, for background, and neither of you guys know this, but that was kind of how I came across your work, Sorcha. I was trying to, because we'd been thinking, I don't think we've ever properly covered vampires on Vayse, have we? Which is weird, because we've done everything else.
Okay.
And I was trying to educate myself a bit on vampires, and I found that book, the 2 Centuries of Immortal Tales.
The British Library one.
And,
yes,
and so then I thought, I'll have a look, because like as a podcaster, you kind of have that think of like, ooh, that looks interesting. Let's see who wrote it, and that's when I came across you, and I kind of went through. I think it might have been on your bio on Amazon, that you were like either Manchester based or you taught at Manchester Metropolitan University or something, and I couldn't believe it. So then when I started diving into your work, because we'd had this idea we might do Lost Boys at some point, and we needed a Halloween episode, I couldn't believe that basically a lot of what you've written, particularly in essays and your dissertation and that sort of thing, basically were exactly what we were looking for.
This is the vampire queen you're looking for. Yes, okay, excellent.
Because there aren't that many like doctors of Gothic studies,
This is true. This is true.
So,
yeah,
I think
and especially where it intersects with pop culture. I think you do have you've experts all over across centuries of literature, and that's absolutely incredible. But when it kind of intersects with popular culture, American culture, but also music, television, that kind of stuff. We're a rare, wonderful breed.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we thought would be so suited to our podcast, because we do have quite a lot of pop culture references in what we do. We're not just like a kind of hard occult podcast who, we talk about a lot about, we've done episodes on like Ghostbusters and Donnie Darko and, stuff like that. So it's like, this is sort of, you're exactly the sort of person we...
Excellent. A future one on time travel, hopefully. We'll talk.
Well, yeah. That's a good idea.
Time travel.
I want to pick your brains on Clive Barker as well.
Yes.
Oh yes, please. Yeah, the book's behind me like a halo.
I think that might be like an episode we have to do, because I'm not. So Buckley's a huge Clive Barker fan.
Huge Clive head.
Yeah.
Huge Clive head.
And whilst I've enjoyed what I've read and what I've seen, I've not done a lot of Clive Barker, so I'll catch up, and then we three can meet again to talk of Clive Barker, because I'd like to get into some of that.
And it's his birthday today. This
it is.
when we're recording. So
and it's also a full moon. I think
and it's also full moon.
Yeah.
So we're invoking one of the other kind of Gothic voices of a generation. So
Clive, be with us.
Yes.
I'll
be talking about him at the end of the month, actually, for the Irish Film Institute are doing a horathon special. They're doing there's an annual horathon event, and we used to go to it as a patron years ago when I lived in Ireland, and they're doing a special event on celebrating 30 years of Lord of Illusions at the end of the month, so that'll be really exciting as well. So talking about Clive there, so I'm always happy to talk about these things. These are the gifts of cultural studies. It's marvelous.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're way off topic now, but
we'll work our way back.
It's interesting. I mean, like I think, because for me, popular culture has sort of. I don't really know where I'm going with this. I'm completely out on a limb.
This is me
like,
every time.
Yeah, but and this is why, probably because you're always talking about popular culture, it gets confusing. But I find it to be something that is so valuable and important to my life. Something that's enriched my life so much. Because I haven't. I like to read, but I haven't read tons of the classics or anything like that. But I feel like I've got quite a good view of popular culture from a certain spectrum of the sort of 80s, 90s, early 2000s. I feel like all of that stuff, like we were talking about just before we started recording, the impact that the X-Files or Twin Peaks has had on our lives. And I wouldn't be the same person that I am today if I hadn't have absolutely fallen in love with Mulder and Scully as a kid, and then when we've talked about this so many times, but I borrowed the VHSs from Buckley of Twin Peaks when that had been shown on Channel 5 or something years ago, and all of that stuff completely changed my life. There's no two ways. I mean, there's certainly before I watched the X-Files and before I watched Twin Peaks, and after, my life completely change direction. And that's why cultural studies fascinates me so much.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the way I can kind of sum it up, and the way I do sum it up with my students, no matter what pop culture text I teach them, really, is remember, today's popular culture is tomorrow's history. So you've got to see it as sort of like you're living and breathing the making and creation and understanding of history, how we talk about what we experience, the things we interact with, the things that matter, the way we process the world. All of that is captured through our popular culture. What we watch, how we spend our time, what we read. So it's really, it might sound highfalutin, but it is true that actually it is all about understanding it, whether it's who is the biggest star at the moment, or whose films are getting made or are not getting made, or if there's some sort of social kind of currency. It captures all that so well and so clearly. So if you're talking to people about, well, why was the X-Files so huge in the 90s? Well, that feeds into so many actually really historically prevalent reasons. So, you can always match up the kind of what I think of as sort of the malleable and maybe the slightly gooey element of popular culture with the dry and the dusty, and it actually brings it back to life.
Yeah,
you can understand what was going on. So
I love that. Yeah, the Ghostbusters episode we did was about a large section of it was about neoliberalist and Reagan politics, together with sort of like biblical prophecy, the four horsemen of the apocalypse and that sort of thing. And like, I love finding the connections like that, even when they're probably, they're 100% not intentional, but they're probably like a bit tenuous. But you can read meaning into it, and it becomes a bit like almost like divination, because you can enrich your understanding of a film or a TV show or a book or even a piece of music, even if the person who created that never intended it at all, and then you have your own sort of secret relationship with that piece of art, which I think I just love that,
Yeah, that's why we still debate these things and what they mean, to us. So, anyway, I promise to talk about vampires now.
No, I was going to ask you, what was it that initially drew you to things like vampires and the darker side of things,
As an academic or just as a fan?
As a human being, like as a kid,
a human being, okay. That's
what,
absolutely fine.
What was your gateway
I was
drug?
terrified of blood as a child, like truly terrified of it.
Really?
And I was terrified of the idea of horror. And then, to cut a long story short, I was being babysat by a cousin of mine, much older, very cool guy, and his little brother and I were being babysat, and he had rented out a movie, and he said, watch that, it's really funny, you'll really like it. I was like, okay. And in this movie, guess the movie, guys, somebody gets blistered. No, I'm way too old for it to be Martyrs. Someone gets blistered on the forehead with a cross.
I know it already.
Someone turns into a dragon-like creature in the basement, and there's a big chrome coffin. What's the movie?
It's Fright Night,
it
1985,
is Fright Night.
Tom Holland.
Exactly, and it scared the bejesus out of me. So I was about, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years old at the time, but it stayed with me. I've got this kind of a visual memory thing going on where things get burned in, and it's very, very hard to lose them. So I was kind of, it was in the back of my brain. Fast forward, I go to university. I've always liked vampires. I've been really into vampire literature as a teenager. The same cousin's other sister got me into reading vampire literature, so Anne Rice, etc. So I was, I've got a lot to thank the family for, to be fair. And so I started reading all the Anne Rice novels, which were kind of prevalent in the 80s and the 90s. I got really reading into them in the 90s with the Neil Jordan movie, Into the Vampire. Also being from Ireland, history of Dracula, very important to us in Ireland. And then, of course, Neil Jordan himself being an Irish director, all that kind of was the right time to be really into it. And to be Irish and to see our stories on an international stage was really exciting, because there hadn't been a Dracula film pretty much since I'd been born. So the first time to get these kind of Coppola's Dracula in 92, and then you Interview and all those kind of the Hollywood Gothic movement that happened in the early 90s, that really captured my imagination. I was exactly the right age for it. I was just entering my kind of 12, 13-year-old phase. So that was really exciting. So I was reading vampire novel literature and trying to get into my vampire movies. So then fast forward, I go to university and ended up doing a completely different degree. I did history and politics, and then I went on to do American studies. But one thing I kept noticing is I kept on kind of cheating on my studies by going to the other parts of the library and reading the complete history of vampires, the complete history of the paranormal, just for fun, It was more interesting in some respects than some of the other stuff I was studying. And it made me realise, I came across a book by a brilliant theorist called Nina Auerbach, who wrote a book called Our Vampires Ourselves. And what she basically did in that book was she talked about contemporary popular culture in the United States, but not just in the United States, and how it kind of, those novels and films and those popular ideas reflected different tensions within the culture. And it just blew my mind. It just made me go, oh my God, of course, these things are of course reflections of the authors, but the periods and in time, the attitudes to women, the attitudes to LGBTQI people, you know, all of that stuff, it was all kind of baked in. So that kind of became an obsessive idea for me. So I decided I'm going to do this for a PhD. I'm going to try and delve deeper, because our back study ends pretty much with Near Dark and Lost Boys. I thought, no, I got to go a lot deeper. There was a lot more ground to cover.
Oh yeah.
So so I went to Trinity in Dublin and did the PhD there in the early 2000s. And it was around the time that vampires were not cool. Like, I mean, you had Blade 2 and a couple of other films like that, but vampires were still kind of a bit... they're not that cool, I guess. And everyone was going ballistic over... I'm trying to remember what was really popular back then.
Buffy
I think
would have been around, would
Buffy,
it?
yeah, but Buffy had kind of gone...
Was that pre-Twilight?
It was pre-Twilight,
pre-Twilight,
yeah. So then by the time I finished my PhD, Twilight literally landed. And and everyone was going ballistic over Twilight. And I was like, no, there's so much more to it than that, guys.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it was a really, really fun time. It was, I could see with every year that I was completing the study that it was kind of swelling in the popular culture, just getting huge. And then, of course, you had True Blood and everything that followed afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the first few series of True Blood, I just absolutely
I
love
really
it.
loved True Blood,
So
I have
good.
to say.
I mean, I did feel again like so many American TV series which become sort of institutions. You know, the last few series I couldn't relate to quite the same.
Well, it took a kind of thematic topic of the year kind of thing, and I think it tried to map it onto the American elections at the time. With limited purchase. I
mean, it was never bad, but I mean, those first few series...
It was very satirical, very funny.
Yeah, very funny. Yeah. No, I love that. Did you ever think that you'd be able to make a living out of this? Because I mean, it seems like something I would never have imagined.
I dreamed of it. I can tell you that much. I've dreamed of it. I managed to manifest, and I don't necessarily have that new age language, but I managed to manifest the things that I genuinely care and love about and think about the most is as part of my career. But I mean, I genuinely love teaching. I genuinely love shaping research and talking with my students about it and seeing them, because they're the next generation after me. You know, they're the ones who are going to carry it on after I'm done. So I'm very excited about that. But it is kind of a nice day when I say, right, well, I've got to teach aliens this morning and I've got to go through all the Clive Barker stuff for tonight's master's class. Yeah. It's not a bad way to live your life.
No.
You know?
I'm trying to work out if I'd rather do your job or be one of your pupils. Like, I don't know which I'd rather be, to be honest.
You can do both.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to sign up.
You can do both.
Manifest
sign up tomorrow.
Well, I mean, on our masters we do that. So I teach the serial killers, the vampires, the Faustian bargains, and so that kind of and some economic horror. That tends to be the stuff I teach. So very much 20th and 21st century materials. But I have colleagues who write about the body. I have colleagues, you know, and the grotesqueries of the body and the new weird and all sorts of fun stuff. So you've got loads and loads of opportunities to do the thing that works for you. So
I like the new weird stuff like that.
Oh, like your Lovecraft and stuff.
Really definitely.
And Ligotti and people like that.
Ligotti,
Ligotti.
Jesus Christ, Ligotti.
I struggle with Ligotti.
Ligotti's hard going.
I love it, but it's
fascinating.
horrible.
But
he got me a Ligotti book for Christmas one year, and I've not been able to finish it. I can read like one story a year.
I have the same book that I gave you, and I've not finished it either because it gets too horrible. About that bit with the factory.
It feels a bit, oh God, by the end of it. And I'm just like, you know, that's the fun part about, you know, the vampires, the serial killers, they have a core philosophy most of the time. And, you know, whether you love it or loathe them, you know, or you reconsider them, like, you know, we're living in an age of reconsidering the origins of the serial killer, for instance, with the Ed Gein stuff on Netflix and all that. It's interesting. I find that interesting because I'm always thinking about the biographical and the subjective. Whereas with Ligotti, it's like, well, we're all doomed or should be nullified into out of existence. It just feels a bit, for me, it just feels a bit, heavy.
Well, because he suffers from edahenia, doesn't he? And so like that's why his writing is particularly joyless because
he cannot experience joy.
Yeah,
Jesus, that's even worse. That's like
I know.
Oh, man, that's the antithesis of me. I've been told I'm one of the most hopeful, bouncy, upbeat people in the whole place. And I am.
I'm glad we're interviewing you and not
it makes me feel joyful that we talk about it. If we talk about monsters, then, you know, that's them put in their place and we can go back to living a good life.
Yeah, but I mean, that's something that's interesting about like the vampire thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, is that in fiction, and I was trying to think about this today, and I say this sort of from a place of not having studied it and just being someone who was thinking about it whilst I was driving along. But like a vampire is never a vampire, is it? A vampire is never just a vampire. You know, like this, it's so easy to be like a carrier for a metaphor of, because like you were saying with True Blood, season after season they use like vampire or some aspect of that myth or an adjoining myth to be a carrier of a message that was political and satirical. And and going back, you know, whereas I mean, you can kind of think the same thing about, say, like I mean, UFOs, for example. You know, like we're seeing it at the moment, aren't we? You know, like that they're basically changes every 5 years. They are what the time needs them to be.
Yeah, it's folklore.
But with vampires, they've been so enduring, and you know, like, it's been, you know, so many years, and they've been so malleable in that respect. Whereas you kind of like ghosts, you know, you can only go so far with that, and you go some interesting ways. You know, like you got Beetlejuice and that sort of thing. You know, and you can get some interesting reads on that sort of thing. And there are obviously a million metaphors you can put to ghosts, but vampires just seem to be particularly sort of like able to carry a lot of symbolic like baggage with them.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the kind of quotes that's burned into my head, to be perfectly honest, since I was a PhD student, is that Nina Auerbach says in her book, she goes, "Vampires go where power is." And that's so true. I mean, whether it's literally they migrate to a national literature movement from another country, or they migrate in terms of cinema from Britain to America, but they go where power is, because they're fantastic. I suppose they are fantastic metaphors, and they're loaded with so many different meanings. But also one of the joys of them is that, unlike a lot of other monsters who may communicate in some capacity, in the vampire literature, we do have vampires who speak. And they do either try and pass as human or communicate with humans in some meaningful way. And certainly since the 60s, even some outlying stories that are actually earlier than that, they speak and narrate their own stories. So that's where you get the kind of rewriting of history, that playful malleability of history that Saberhagen brings in the 70s, and Rice does, and King does. It's really exciting.
I hadn't even thought of that, because that's got the thing
that's the premise of my PhD, is what do they talk about? So when they start talking.
So you got like these people who are trying to pass as human. So therefore their interpretation of what human is what they understand from like a point of being some creature of the outside, which is sometimes hundreds of years old. Yeah. Trying to pass as a human, therefore you get a weird like broken reflection of what a human being actually is handed to you. That's really interesting.
That was the other part of it, was that because they don't see their own reflection, that whenever they look at the human experience of that period becomes the reflection in and of itself. It replaces the mirror. So the idea around what I thought was so interesting about the vampire was that, for all of the kind of variations we have of Dracula, for example, Dracula is the most adapted non-human, according to Guinness Book of Records. Sherlock Holmes is the most adapted human. So in these literary stories, but with Dracula, no two Draculas are alike. They're like fingerprints. We know what they are, but they don't all conform to the same rules. They don't all represent the same thing. Some are parodies, some are in porn, some are in dance, some are in very serious high drama. So it's very very diffuse. And we all kind of say Dracula as though we all know the rules, but the rules for Dracula are different from the common vampire. The common vampire lives under Dracula, in the sense that Dracula is the master king of sort of the contemporary narrative. So,
what do you think the origin of the vampire myth is?
Where
do you think it's oldest? Or
it's different from every nationality. I mean, every national culture. We looked into this a little bit when we were doing Visions of the Vampire, myself and my co-editor Xavier Aldana Reyes, and it does differ massively in each continent. So, the Asian vampire, you have the hopping Chinese vampire, you have the Erythromanic vampire. So where's Count von Count from? He's actually from a Chinese folk tale about the compulsive need to count. You have the Strigoi, from Romania, and around Greece and places like that. So there's different evolutionary origin points, but it usually is this encounter with an impossible corpse, or a corpse that does things that are not considered safe for humans to do. So some drink tears, for instance, others drink sickly fluids if you've been sick, like phlegm. That's more towards the Asian cultures. Our own one is more to do with the decomposition in the body, and then the idea of pressing down on the body before we, did preservations with bodies and things and drained out blood, and that blood coming out of the mouth or out of the nose or eyes, and that, oh my God, they were considering it to be fresh blood, and actually it was the blood that had nowhere to go, essentially, once the corpse had been buried. So you have this anthropological understanding that comes out of Paul Barber's work in the 1980s and talking about that, and contemporary diseases like talking about porphyria, and there's lots of other kind of skin related diseases and sensitivities that were aligned with vampirism. Redheads were accused of being vampires. Babies born with teeth were accused of being vampires. So it is myth and superstition, as well as early medical practices and not understanding the processes of the body sometimes. So we need to tell stories about that. Yeah. Yeah.
And is it a case that that you think that it's all sort of come together, these various different strands through kind of media, through storytelling?
Yeah.
And once a story becomes, because one of the things that I think we're going to be talking about quite a lot in this season of Vayse is the idea of stories, the idea of fictions and stories, and how they
of that,
how we need to tell stories as a species. We need to tell stories.
How it's more than human. How it's divine.
And it's interesting how that story, how it takes a story to bring all of these separate sort of strands and separate things into one kind of, I don't know what the word is for it, like it's all put together out of these.
I don't know.
Yeah, it just put together out of these different things, and it's the story that actually is the thing that pervades and that sort of carries on through hundreds and hundreds of years as being, and it brings us to, the Lost Boys or whatever.
And it's quite amazing really how that speaks to it in an 80s context. We can definitely talk about that all you like. I think they are both. I think vampires are a really useful metaphor for lots of anxieties around what happens post-death. And post-death, I mean, there's the zombie kind of putrefaction. You can go in that direction, and that's much more based particularly out of Haiti and the history of Haiti, and obviously slavery and the horrors of that. But with the vampire, you do have this sense of those ethereal people who give you the weird feelings sometimes, who walk as though they belong to a different group of people. They walk amongst us. This is something that you see in the contemporary vampire from Polidori onwards, this idea of people who cut through society. They seem odd, they seem strange, might be very cold, and somehow they have managed to terrify people. They're the modern vampire, the ones who look just like us humans. The earlier versions are the ones that we see as sort of almost pre-evolutionary, the ones who are embody some sort of our misunderstandings about medicine, our misunderstandings about burial practice. So you can sort of see it in movements rather than trying to tie it down to a particular year or era.
Yeah, because it was the Eastern European sort of the very ghoulish sort of like death shroud, rotting flesh, like
almost zombie-like if you think of it.
But it was more sort of European like romantic literature, I suppose, that sort of crystallized the myth into what we kind of understand it today. You gave it that ethereal edge. Am I on sort of right lines there?
Yes, absolutely. They usually tend to be upper class as well. I mean, again, but if you've got a long time to exist, you've got a long time to, gather together for the riches and wealth that you need,
Yeah. I mean, I find that completely fascinating. And I think that where I'd like to sort of segue into Lost Boys a little bit here is how you take something like that, because you take the vampire myth as we know it, and we'll take like Dracula as sort of an easy reference point for people who might not be as sort of into the vampire stuff, and you have a lot of references to the ghoulish sort of Romanian type vampires, particularly in how people defend themselves by like with the religious imagery and like the weird superstitions, like they can't cross water, and there's like various bits about salt, silver, garlic and all that sort of thing. It's all very European, and then, like you say, Bram Stoker. I think Rudyard Kipling did a poem about a vampire, and there's all this sort of, it's all like a European it's very, like European. You think of the old, like misty castles and the large forests that you get in Eastern Europe.
Well, it comes earlier than Stoker. Stoker's just in the middle of that tradition because Polidori was doing that as well.
Okay.
Byron. So they were going on these grand tours of Europe. Basically, you wonder. It sounds really great if you were a bloke at that time, and you had a lot of wealth, because you basically go, I'm going off to Europe for 3 months with my bestie. We're going to travel around and have a great time, probably take some illicit substances and write loads of poetry. I mean, it sounds deadly.
Nice.
And that's what they were doing. They're off doing that. And this is where you get the origin of the Villa Diodati, the stories, the Night of the Ghost story competition, where the vampire Polidori's version of it is sort of picked up. And so he initiates the first ideas around that story. You have Shelley, who Mary Wollstonecraft, who writes what becomes Frankenstein. You have again Byron with his fragment, which was another sort of vampire tale. So you have this kind of these kind of friends who get together and have this really kind of luxurious, relaxing time, and out of that is born sort of these nightmares that we still make movies about, and we still think about, and we dress up as Halloween. And you know what I mean? It's got this incredible level of pervasiveness within our culture.
Yeah, I mean, they were tapping into some powerful archetypes there, weren't they? And what was that late 18th century then? Polidori?
No, that was early. That was the early 19th century. So that was summer of 1816.
Yeah, because I'm always like surprised at how late Dracula is, because that comes along.
Dracula's later. Dracula's 1897.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of my favorite books of all time. That I didn't know what to expect, because I never did it at school or anything. I picked it up in my 20s, and like I just found that like oppressive feel that runs through every page. Like very very powerful in that, and I can see why that book in particular caught people's imaginations, because it's a book that you can like genuinely feel as you read it. Those the bits, just the weird bits stick in my mind. Like not some bits now. It's been so long since I've read it that I can't remember bits of the plot, but I remember just odd images. Like there's a bit with like this sort of trailing mist, and like I think one of the characters wanders. I think it might be Mina, kind of wanders out and sees this mist, and then there's the boat coming in at Whitby and stuff like that, and all that stuff is sort of really like. Really, it was that imagery as much as the story itself that really soaked into me. And what interests me, and what I was going to ask you, was how that then translates to America. Which is like obviously the people go across there, because you get a lot of European settlers.
This is true.
The landscape is completely different. The myths and legends that are born out of that landscape are wildly different when you go back to the First Nations people, and so I like what I'm thinking is that when you get to the Lost Boys, and there's obviously American vampire movies before that and after that, but you get a sort of like a mutation of it, to fit that surrounding. So are you able to talk to that a little bit? Absolutely.
So I mean, your vampire narrative, if we take Dracula, just that might be the really interesting lynch point, right? So you got the novel published in 1897. You have Stoker actually writes a dramatization of it for copyright purposes, that is performed on the stage of the Lyceum Theatre, so not for an audience, just to literally secure copyright in the early, I think 1902 or 3. But he's already thinking about it outside of the realm of it as a novel, okay? And then we have the Edison cinematograph in 1910, when they make Frankenstein. Edison directs Frankenstein. So we have the translation of these stories, these adaptations, to early cinema. By 1922, we have Murnau's Nosferatu in Germany. And this is a violation of copyright, but at the same time, it's so significant to what we understand of German expressionism. The 2 copies remaining of that, because there was a decree to burn them all because it was a violation of copyright, but because the 2 copies were saved, we still have that film today. But in 1922, you have this film that's actually violated copyright. So what do? Well, you think, if I'm offered enough money, if you're Florence Stoker, you're offered enough money, then you can just sell the rights to the highest bidder, who's going to make a version of Dracula that you might like, actually. And that's the case of Universal. So Universal get the rights to make Dracula. Now, the 20s were a great time for Dracula adaptations as well. There was 2 big play versions of it. There was the Baldeston version and the Dean version, and played in Broadway. And they give us the kind of feeling for Dracula that we have now, in terms of it being in terms of a play, it was a 2-room kind of play, as opposed to your big castles, your massive landscape, your swirling mist. It's more like a drawing room mystery kind of setting, okay? And then you also get the clothing that we think of with Bela Lugosi. We get the cape, we get the 3-piece tuxedo, again tapping into that sophistication that we expect in the modern vampire. So if we get that in those plays, and then that, of course, Lugosi is cast out of that and brought into the cinema for the Universal version, 1931. That's now you've already in the American landscape. You're in the American imaginary. You're already being projected on cinema screens across the nation as the film travels across. So that's how you made that leap from novel to big screen epic in 35 years, and that's incredible, and then from there we don't have to, it only gets more, it picks up the pace essentially, when we start to think about other vampires that are not like Dracula then meets Abbott and Costello, and you know what I mean, there's loads of like crossovers, and it ggets sent up. The literature keeps on changing. The literature around vampires in general keeps on evolving till we get to things like I Am Legend, and then we start to see the protein zombie kind of story come out of I Am Legend as well. But vampires get there really, really quickly. And the thing about it is when you tell that many versions of a story like Dracula, and you can never contain the entire novel in a film because it just isn't coherent as a film, really. You've got to kind of chop and change things. You then can make different versions of it. You put in different actors. And to get us to Lost Boys in one sentence, essentially, the 1970s was rammed full of Dracula adaptations, and there were some of them are really, really great. But a lot of the actors playing Dracula in the 1970s were men in their 40s. Very beautiful men like Frank Langella, who really pulled it off, and he also played Dracula on stage. But once we get to MTV money, when we get to 1980s, we have the inception of MTV, we have the inception of this kind of regeneration of youth culture and youth defiance. There's your Lost Boys. You've no Dracula in the 80s, but you have Lost Boys.
I was trying to think of other 80s vampire films, because was The Hunger...
Yeah. The Hunger is great. Yes, it was.
The Hunger's amazing. I love that film. It's really disturbing. But I mean, you've got like David Bowie as a vampire, and you can't really get much.
That's one of my favourite scenes from the 80s. Is David Bowie sitting in the waiting room, literally kind of decomposing. It's quite amazing.
It's a really haunting film, and it's obviously. It's got the Strieber link as well.
UFOologist, there you go. Yeah, Strieber, yes.
Because there's a theory that like that was kind of if you believe that what happened to Strieber was actually something that was some kind of visitors or external entities that have been fucking with him, then him writing The Hunger was him kind of almost writing about that subconsciously but not knowing, like about these predatory creatures from outside that were
because it predated communion, didn't it?
Yeah. But I mean I don't know, it's a that's a whole other
it's a whole other story. No, I agree. I mean, Strieber himself is a whole other podcast, I'm sure, so
but in terms of that sort of concentration on the youth culture and the because I'm like you say, MTV, and suddenly rock and roll, it was the teenagers were the sort of biggest focus on capitalism again. You've talked about and I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself, but you've talked about the teenage trilogy of vampire movies from America in the 80s. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no problem. So, I mean, we don't have a huge... There are lots of vampire films in the 80s, but they are varying quality and varying kind of, capital purchase, I suppose, in the period. The ones that stuck out to me, especially when I was writing the dissertation and in more detail in the book, was that 3 of them kind of came in kind of this 22-month period where there was a high concentration of them looking at similar values and interests, even though they're all quite different in style. So there was Fright Night from 1985, Tom Holland film that came out midsummer 1985, again an unusual time to bring out a vampire film in June, but it was an interesting film to do nonetheless. You have that followed then by Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark, a very different, pensive film, darker, and very much looking at the idea of isolation and being cast off in America of the Reagan era. And that followed them with Lost Boys, which kind of feels like a another satirical version, a much lighter version, but a satirical version of sort of the Reaganite, 1980s bloodsucker Brady Bunch kind of feeling to it. And those three together, I think there are other ones that are really superb, like Vampire's Kiss, which comes with Nicolas Cage a little later, and that's really a take on yuppiedom. But those three deal with teenagers, deal with parents who are missing, and parents who cannot cope with the kind of pressures of reconstituting the family. And then you have the teenager who, for whatever reason, is lured away by the vampire or the vampire acolyte in order to experience the world, and then of course has to then come back and reconstitute the family or protect the family. But it all works through different politics, and it works through different sort of genres in some respects, using the vampire in different ways. So that's what I really, really liked about it. I thought they worked really, really well.
When did you first watch The Lost Boys, and do you remember the first time you watched it and your first reaction to it?
I do. I remember I was working as a teenager in a coffee shop with a colleague. I must have been 16 or so, and we had the soundtrack on, and I was like, that soundtrack's amazing. What is that? And he says, oh my God, you've never seen Lost Boys? And I said, I always kind of meant to. And I again, really like my vampires, but I wasn't quite as religious as I am now about it, pardon the pun. But he said to me, oh no, you got to go rent Lost Boys. There was a 24-hour video store on the way home from this job, and I called in and I got it. And I think I watched it twice the next day. I was just like, this is absolutely amazing. Amazing. How did I miss it? But then, I made up for lost time.
I think I remember when we first watched it, it kind of probably felt familiar, even though I'd not seen it, because it had Corey Feldman in
Corys.
It had, the two Corys, and it had like a lot of the beats that I recognised from,
and music as well.
From other films and stuff like that.
You had like the Goonies and like other films that had sort of come before it. I mean, it was 1987, wasn't it? So it came out, I think it was about the 21st of July in the US, and then 23rd of October. So around this time of the year, because we're recording this in early October, in 1987. It's the first film that I remember there being hype around. Right. I was 5 years old at that time. And my mum's youngest sister is 9 years older than me, exactly. Yeah. She was born on the same day, but 9 years before me. And I remember I used to go and visit my grandparents, and so I was 5 and she was 14, and she was living. And I remember it so clearly because it was just the 80s bedroom, and she had like all those black and white pictures, like you remember when I got you that clock, Buckley, of the handsome muscular man holding cradling little baby.
I know that one.
So all that sort of black and white photography on the wall, and one of those swatches, like the giant swatch watches that used to hang on the walls. So I remember that 80 room. I remember being in that room, and I, like talking to her, and she was saying, "Oh, I went to watch this movie," because she would have been just old enough. I think it was probably a 15 in the UK. I think it was rated R in America.
It was 18 in Ireland.
It was in the UK. I think it was 15. Yeah, and anyway, so she's seen The Lost Boys, and like she was describing it to me in detail, and like my mind was just boggling, and I was only like 5, and I was thinking, she was like, and then they fell off this bridge and they're hanging on, and the wires cutting through their hands, and I'm thinking like, Jesus Christ, this is like the most terrifying thing I've ever heard, and then it falls into a bath of holy water and melts, and I was just like, Jesus. And it wasn't the film that when we finally watched it, when me and Buckley were 15 or 16 ourselves.
The scariest thing about it was actually just the realization that we would never be as cool as Kiefer Sutherland is in that film. So, what is your favourite part of the film? Do you have a favourite scene or a favourite?
Yes, I do. Okay, I will share with you. So, I mean, I love all of it. Like, there's not a frame I'd change. Like, but I absolutely love that opening. That opening from where literally you can hear the one little chorister at the very beginning when you have the Warner Brothers logo, all the way through to when we actually go up to the actual Big Dipper on Santa Cruz Beach. That to me is stunning. It's such, and I mean, it's so clever knowing why they did it, but it just brings you into that film straight away. And then you are on the carousel watching Kiefer Sutherland walk through it. So the cool thing about this is when I was on honeymoon with my husband, we went to Santa Cruz. They didn't lean into the vampire thing then, which is, you know, well over 10 years ago. But we have been on that carousel. We have walked that boardwalk, and now they do screenings of Lost Boys. Get off the boardwalk, exactly. But it is so special. So I'm watching it with that kind of context in mind now. But even when I was younger, I was like, this is amazing. This gets you in the zone straight away.
Yeah,
you know?
I definitely like there's something about the mood and the colour of that film. All of the sort of flame. At night,
the lighting,
and the lighting is like I watched it recently, like a couple of months ago, and it's the first time I've seen it in probably sort of, I don't know, probably 10 years. And what really struck me was the lighting in it, was just how evocative that lighting is, and how well that fits with the music. And I think
gorgeous, doesn't it?
It does, and I think all my favourite scenes in it are like the one you've described, like are the bits with the fire and the
sweeping landscapes,
nighttime, and like the reflection in the sea and stuff like that.
There's beautiful aerial shots as well. You know, the aerial shots really give you that sense of predation, rather than it's not wow how beautiful it is. It's predation. It's something is coming to get you. It's great, you know.
Yeah, and you know what I didn't realise until I watched it yesterday was, I think his name's Michael Chapman, I think, who's a cinematographer who did Taxi Driver. So, which also has a very predatory, like the way it's shot. The
steam rising up in Taxi Driver, you feel there's something bubbling from the underneath. You know, it's got that really incredible sensation to it. So I'm not remotely surprised. I mean, for me, the use of colour is very 80s, and I say that not in a derisive way. So I actually love the colour palette of the 80s because it's got that red pink going on, but at the same time it's got those deep black blues that you feel completely at odds with the world constantly. And vampirism is a metaphor for the amusement park in the film. That's what it is. It's the amusement park where you actually feel you want to stay forever, but you can't. You know what I mean? And the fact that if you did stay forever, you'd actually end up hating it. It'd become something sickly and unpleasant, and almost like the child having the tantrum. It's too much. It's overwhelming. So that's what I quite love about it. It kind of always ties vampirism back to that space. So that's what makes it really exciting. It's fun. One thing I will try and do before they stop doing it is go and see it on the beach in Santa Cruz, because they do it on the beach, screenings once in a while.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's like and although we didn't grow up in Santa Cruz or anywhere remotely similar, like I feel when I think back to sort of around the time that me and Hine first watched the film when we were 16, 17, and it felt like, I don't know, like it felt like a lot of the time it was night, and it didn't look as good as that. But, you know, it's just that thing where when you're a teenager, certain things like burn into your soul, and like the things that you feel are so extreme and so intense. And then when you listen to music or watch films from that time, it hits you harder than anything else. And I feel like Lost Boys, we just watched it at a time when we were particularly soft, and it just sort of permeated into our brains, and like it kind of felt like, because we used to watch it a lot. It isn't like we watched it once
a week.
We probably watch it like every 2 weeks, something like that. And like and just absorb it.
It's the kind of thing if I put on now when I'm like, if I'm feeling down or ill, or I've had a really long week, and like, you just inevitably pick up those films from that period in your life, don't you? Like just shove on Goonies there, or shove on, you know, Back to the Future. Well, that's a panacea for all my ills. You know, but Lost Boys would be there too. Do you know what I mean?
Labyrinth.
Be one that Labyrinth. The ones that you just shove that on. The world will be all right in 90 minutes. You know what I mean? It's got that soothing quality.
Have you got a favourite character?
Oh God, David.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my word!
Yeah.
I was blessed in his life to meet Kiefer Sutherland years ago.
Wow.
I mean, and I got him to sign my novelization of Lost Boys. So,
Nice.
but he, even in person, my word, I couldn't say no. You know?
He seems so much older, doesn't he? Like you were saying, like he was 18 or whatever, 19 when he filmed it. But he seems, because there's that shot right at the end when he dies. Spoiler alert.
He's so baby-faced in that shot with the lighting.
Did he shave him? Because he's got like the.
They must have literally done the razor and then action. You know.
He looks like cherubic, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because he's got such an unusual face. He looks kind of wolf-like almost. To me, like, and especially the way that the way that the
phenomenal cheekbones,
the way that they sort of frame his face on like the cover and on all the promotional material in that kind of very kind of Kubrick stare, but the length of his head, and it reminds me of like a wolf, you know, and I'm sure that was intentional. I'm sure it's to give him like an animal, you know, but then
a predatory kind of feeling,
but also animal magnetism. You know, it's also a very sexy film, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think about wolves though. I thought about cats. You know, like when particularly when he changes into the vampire. You know, the scene when they're feeding of those surf Nazis on the beach.
Fans as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, Aerosmith. Yeah, he's very like the way that they change, because they don't look hideous when they change. You know, because like in like Buffy or something, you know, you'd have like the beautiful like David Boneras. And then he'd vamp out and he'd be all hideous. Whereas, like, the Lost Boys stay sexy when they change, you know. Like
they just have a bit more prosthesis in their face. But, you know, you still can tell Brooke Carter's quite beautiful, the tall blonde one. You know, you can still tell that they have their features. They're very recognisable from who they were. It's just they've become somewhat monstrous in the eyes and around the kind of proto-bumpies, you know. That you get later with Buffy.
What's the deal with that little boy, or is it a girl?
Laddie, boy.
Oh, Chance. Yeah, no, that's boy. Yeah. That's Laddie.
Yeah. What happened? What, like, because it seems like a bit, almost like it was meant to be a bit more, but it never.
He's dressed in like Civil War uniform or something. It's crazy.
He's got a kind of a Sergeant Pepper thing going on, I thought. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like a proto Sergeant Pepper. So he's another child with like a milk carton kid who's gone missing.
You see him on the milk carton.
Star kind of adopts him as sort of the big sister role kind of thing. It almost looks like at some points you think that's not her kid or anything. It's definitely, you know, a kind of big sister thing. But he's he's a milk carton kid. He's one of those disappeared kids.
But when do you? Oh no, it must be recently because he's on the milk carton.
Yeah.
So
he's on the milk carton early on.
It's just the way he's dressed. But I guess like it's probably just they dressed him in whatever.
I think it's whatever they found in the cave. Personally, you know, throw that on, you'll be fine.
There is a weird mix of stuff, you know, because like the whole thing has that weird. Because when you're looking at 87, you're only 20 years out of 67, you know, when you're saying Sgt. Pepper's and stuff. And the whole thing has that sort of like beaten up hippie thing, the way that stars dress.
I'm sure between us, we've got band T-shirts that are older than that in our wardrobes today.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably something I'm wearing now is probably older than that, you know.
But and also I guess you've got like there's a little bit of like that kind of Guns N' Roses aesthetic in there as well with if you imagine like the top hat and although no one in Lost Boys wears a top hat, but you know, that sort of almost a bit Victorian urchin kind of thing.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going with that kind of jacket. I'm thinking of the cover. I can't remember who on the cover is Sgt. Pepper now off the top of my head, but it has that kind of look as well. It just felt very, very sort of 60s colourful playfulness, but they've put it in a kind of a greeny grey on him. So
everything looks good and everyone looks good, and that is like a signature of a Joel Schumacher movie, isn't it? I hadn't realised that he came from like a fashion designer route into film, didn't he?
Yeah, he was costume designer.
And then he got into films through wardrobe, and then became a director. And I do think that like. Because in my mind, when I think of Joel Schumacher, I think of like nipples on the bat suit, basically, you know. And I think that I've been unfair with that. Because I realised that I do love a lot of his movies. Like, again, I was the right age, you know, Flatliners had a big impact on me, and again, it's another weird one.
Oh, absolutely.
Lost Boys.
Love that movie.
But he did some stuff Phone Booth and stuff like more modern stuff that actually resonated a lot. He did the Phantom of the Opera movie. He did St. Elmo's Fire.
Didn't love that one.
But it was mainstream though, very mainstream, wasn't it?
Yeah, very mainstream. And St. Elmo's, of course, was huge. Brat Pack movie. And
so there was actually a bit more to him than because I kind of think of him as like a Zack Snyder of the time, but because of the Batman stuff. But when you actually look back, like there is more substance to his movies, I think, than probably I've given him credit for in the past.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think of when I think of particular directors, I know kind of what I'm expecting when they have a new release or whatever. And with Schumacher, I always knew it would look nice. It wouldn't necessarily always be very good, but it would always have a certain aesthetic quality, and that comes from his costuming eye. There's always that attention to detail. And I think with Lost Boys, what's quite joyful about it is that they still look really cool. Yeah, 100%. And we're talking about nearly 40 years later. You know what I mean? They still look bitchin'. You know what I mean? So
even the granddad.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know he's rocking the Willie Nelsons, but he's that's fantastic. You know what I mean?
Well, that's why he's able to get a date.
Yeah,
being
the Widow
elderly
Johnson.
Man. He's got a date with the Widow Johnson.
The poor Widow Johnson.
yeah. I guess he does have a sick ride, and he grows marijuana, and
he's got a great house as well. Incredible.
He's having a great life. He's got quite a lot going for him, really.
He does,
hasn't he?
Yeah. He's growing his own stash. He's got the double stuffed Oreos and cookies.
He's got a great sense of humour as well. He plays dead for his daughter.
Yeah,
and he knows about it all along anyway.
He knows about it all. Yeah.
Well, that's something that we need to talk about.
That'd be a good prequel.
Yeah, I have heard people discussing the possibility that it would be a great TV show. You're set in the 60s with like the badass granddad.
Yeah.
So, one of the great things about Lost Boys, of all the great things, is that it doesn't try to explain itself. Apart from some very, very basic bits and pieces about what the rules are, which you have to know to keep the plot flowing.
The Frog Brothers.
Yeah. You don't...
Truth, justice,
the American way.
Yeah, but you don't get there's no attempt, there's no Coppola who sticks in the whole romantic warrior who curses himself and his bloodline. There's nothing like that. The vampires are there, and it's like, oh shit, there's vampires. And they try to tell their mum, and the mum doesn't believe them, so they have to sort it all out themselves. But then at the end, the granddad comes and he's like, oh yeah, all the damn vampires, sort of thing. So not only does other people acknowledge that the vampires are real, but they kind of acknowledge that Santa Carla has a vampire problem as well. And so you start to think oh, hold on, have we just seen a tiny bit here of something else that's massive that's going on, all these other stories that are probably going on around there, and we just happen to have sort of got the window into one.
I mean, he kind of seeds it early on when he says, well, let me put it to you this way, if all the corpses around here were to suddenly stand up, we'd have one hell of a population problem, which misleads you initially to think it's the murder capital, all these corpses, all these people have been killed. No, it's actually... We've actually got an undead problem too.
They do have that problem.
Do you know what I mean? So, So but then he has removed himself from it. You do get that sense of, well, what do you want me to do about it? It's when they attack the family that then he inadvertently springs into action, I would argue. But because it's brought into the house. It's brought into the home
and
itself.
it is out of all the movies that I really love, I think that one is the closest to sort of a Deus Ex Machina ending because I don't know why he takes it upon himself, how he knows what's going on in the house enough to drive his car through the wall, and how he knows that the stakes are going to stake Max.
Well, it perfectly captures Max.
And so the whole ending, it just stops dead at that point, doesn't it? And that's what's interesting about it, because nothing is resolved. There's not even a reunion scene with Michael and Star. Like the,
oh no, she rushes towards him and stuff.
But
and then everything explodes, and all the house just vomits out all its contents. Yeah. But we do have Corey and Michael, and we have and Diane Wiest, and the three of them there. So the family is reconstituted, staring back at him, and then we go to darkness. So it's this idea of what he was in on it, he knew it all along. Yeah. And I think I've always felt that as sort of a grandpa at the end, sort of thing, okay. And in a very sort of, sometimes you do trust your elders, even if they don't appear to understand you. They probably have fought worse. So I get that kind of feeling. And it is about those elder generation, back to our 80s. It is about that elder generation and who is going to be the ones who influence the kids of the future. Is it the neo-capitalists and people like Max? Or is it going to be the sort of more passive grandparents who were hippies and were anti-war movement and all that kind of thing? So you do have that fight for the soul of American youth going on in the background.
Yeah, because I noticed that when I watched it yesterday, because I think I wrote a rambling question to you by email yesterday about sort of how I see that as because what you have is essentially the Lost Boys, the vampire gang are essentially a bunch of homeless kids, aren't they? Sort of that there's no one really looking after them, and the whole of Santa Carla is full of non-normative sort of odd weirdos, and they're uniformly looked down upon by especially by Sam and Michael when they come from Phoenix, like a big city, in a different part of America, and they start to sort of look down on these homeless people basically who turns out to be the source of all of the societal problems, but all the missing people, like all this sort of thing.
I never read it as them looking down on them. I'm thinking of the opening sequence, when they're coming into the city and into the town. It is a source of fascination, but I do think it's more of a sheltered. I've read it always as I'm coming from a sheltered, white bread Arizona, coming into cool hippie California, where it's got all this sort of cultural experience I would never be exposed to before in Arizona, and then I'm seeing this as sort of like a rebirth, because obviously it's that symbol of the phoenix anyway, and then rebirth and seeing a new way of living a life, and the fact that it's now open with possibilities. So I mean the only time you ever see kind of anything that even hints at that is when Diane Wiest says, here's some money, give those kids something to eat, and it seems to be something more just a pure concern that there are kids living eating out of dumpsters. But a lot of it is actually, look how funky and cool young people and young culture is. The piercings, the hair, the tattoos, all that stuff's really cool. I always thought of it as quite cool. But
Sam doesn't think that, does he? Because
Well, no, Sam's so square. He's a fashion victim. I haven't heard that since the 80s.
Yeah, because he's all the sort of no TV, no MTV.
Diet frozen yogurt.
Diet frozen yogurt bar. Oh my God. Yeah.
It reminds me of the way it treats the fashion, just where, there's that scene you said at the start where it shows the various people like on just walking around. It's almost a bit like Purple Rain in that you've got there's a similarity there with that sort of fashion where it's that kind of very 80s goth, but not kind of, it's that kind of very glamorous, almost new romantic crossing kind of
That's
goth.
what I was thinking, it's the new romantic crossover.
It's like the way that it's shot and it just sort of shows them walking around. It's like they're not even characters in the film. It's just saying, look, here's some like people that look amazing. It's... And
it was so rebellious and different from 70s culture, which felt so down and, felt so heavy in terms. I mean, the music got louder, the colour palette got brighter, the expression of anti-conformity. I mean, what's the alternative? Reaganism? My God. So, there is this sense of if I'm gonna rebel, I'm gonna really rebel. And I'm gonna rebel through my clothing, which I can alter and change. You don't have to spend money on it, you can do it yourself. The fact that the kids are I'll pierce your ears for you. You don't have to pay anyone to do it. We'll help you with your own body modification. That there's something rebellious in and of itself in that, and I think that it speaks again to that kind of working outside of capitalism, because you've got Max, who is the heart of capitalism with the video store. You know, a job I did have for many years and absolutely loved, by the way. I loved my video store job. So, you know, but this is the source of capitalism and circulation of capital within the film.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a business owner, isn't he? And
exactly.
what it turns out, his whole dastardly plot is to sort of unite a nuclear family, isn't it? Of sort of like, he wants in on the... on Diane Weiss too. Like, I didn't realize that she was like a double Oscar winner as well, like because she's very underused in that movie.
I see her as just 80s mom. She was 80s mom in Bright Lights Big City. She was 80s mom in Lost Boys, Hannah and her sisters. You know what I mean? And obviously Parenthood, if you know the comedy Parenthood as well. She's brilliant.
Yeah, Max is an interesting character because although, again, spoiler alert, he's kind of almost he's the arch villain really. But he's just so uncool and so it's like he's not. He's kind of a bit of a nothing, really. He's just like he kind of. You only see him in his vampire form for like a couple of seconds. I think. Yeah, and like
that's right. Yeah,
it's
at the very end. He's got that off. He does a kind of what do you call it? Kiss kind of tongue.
Yeah, it's like
you know, no, Gene Simmons.
I like the bit where one of the Frog Brothers refers to the. One of the vampires as Twisted Sister.
Yes, that's
the death by stereo scene.
Yeah, incredible that bit. Going back to the Max character, because he like you say, he barely vamps out at all. But he's the master manipulator, isn't he? And that's sort of like capitalist, you know, like no matter how, you know, because obviously MTV feels rebellious, but what it is packaged up capitalism directed towards teenagers.
Of course.
And so it's almost like a comment at the end, you know, like, oh, you thought all these guys were cool. Actually, it's the video store guy who's been sort of, you know, like he's set all this up, you know, and he's made it all happen.
And video store also representing the feeding of culture as well. How do you get culture into people's heads?
He's the one who's collecting the money for that as well. Yeah, so he's got that sort of like, he's got the power.
So then taking that out to the next level, then, you know, with what we think of as rebellious viewing or watching or listening to, it's still run by record labels. We're still paying for it. You know, studios. It's still the hyper-capitalist machine is inescapable.
And just what you said at the very beginning there, because there is the power. Max has the power, and that's revealed at the end. But actually, it was there all along.
It's actually flagged up. It's flagged up at the beginning of the movie. So the first time when she goes in to get the job, you know, she brings in the little boy, and they get the lolly and everything. If you listen to the sound, listen to the music in the background, you'll hear it on the speak. It's actually transitions from the stage. It's you hear power play. Song called Power Play, and if you listen to it again, it's just literally flagging it up a little moment. Again, this is Power Play, so it's all there. Yeah. It's clever,
and it's literally that the mother brings a lost boy to him.
Yes, exactly. You know, which is, and then his mother finds him, brings him back, and you're like, oh, thank goodness.
And that's the point where he looks at her and he's like, oh, she can bring me more boys.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Have a reward. And then when the boys walk in, he says they're wild kids. So he sees them as you're being brought into line. You know, you're being, because they're always operating just outside of the sort of corporate space.
God, it's such a good film.
Yeah.
It is.
I think it's been long enough. I think we need to address the elephant in the room.
Go for it.
Saxophone guy.
Yeah, Tim Capello. Yay.
Talk to us about Tim Capello and how is there any precedent for a character like that in a vampire film?
Oh, see, I'm so fond of Tim Capello. So I've seen him at a couple of conventions,
really?
And I've seen him. Yeah, he plays. He's kind of the patron saint of the For the Love of Horror convention, which is coming up soon in Manchester. So he's played there many, many years, and he always plays I Still Believe, and everyone goes ballistic. It's great fun. And he still has the outfit and some variation of said outfit. But in the movie, when he was shooting it, he said to Joel Schumacher, can I do, sets? Can I lift, weights basically in between takes? Because he wanted to look as pumped as possible. covered in baby oil, looks sweaty and hot and slightly sunburned, and singing away. The song is actually quite a religious song, I still believe. If you go through the lyrics of it, it's more like sort of a call to prayer than anything else. But it's the fact that he's this is the most hyper masculine he can make himself look like in 1987 fashion.
Yeah.
Which the second, pretty much like within a couple of years, we're looking at it going, what?
Yeah.
He looks like he's veering so close to sort of the performative masculinity that tips over into camp culture.
Yeah.
So I think there's something so interesting there. And he's wonderful. I'm very fond of Tim Cabello, I must say.
It is really because that bit is obviously absolutely iconic, and that is the song that I listen to from that soundtrack where I need to be lifted up, is I still believe. But there is hyper masculinity that you'd expect to find in an 80s gay club, basically, isn't it? It's that sort of, it's very, very...
I mean, we feel close to Rob Halford there, don't we?
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a fine line. I mean, it's like
very fine line.
And even with like the 80s metal look as well, the the hair metal and stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, Guns N' Roses were I mean, they looked like women, didn't they? I mean, especially Axl Rose.
Yeah, they were a bit different because they were quite a lot like more
Motley
fucked
Crue.
up.
Yeah,
but like certainly the more hair metal side of that, like Guns N' Roses were a bit more.
Yeah, like Poison, the poodle
Poison,
and
yeah.
and
Def
Bon
Leppard.
Jovi, with the very pretty
Rat.
boys.
Oh, God bless. Def Leppard. I mean, Joe Elliott had fabulous hair in the 80s. Do you know what I mean? So,
Well, see, I didn't realise, and I'm a bit embarrassed about this, but until I watched the film yesterday, which is the first time in probably about a decade as well. I have been sleeping on Lost Boys a bit, but I hadn't realised the sort of the extreme queer coding that goes out throughout the whole movie.
Oh, massively.
And it's interesting because obviously Joel Schumacher was very open about his sexuality and being a gay man. But what I found is going through, because it occurred to me yesterday, and obviously then there's the obvious sort of bits and pieces. Obviously the simmering tension between David and Michael is absolutely palpable, and there's absolutely, it's almost like Star sort of leads Michael to David, and then Star kind of fades into the background and their eyes lock.
Absolutely.
And it's just from that moment on, they are each other's, they are that is the core of the movie.
Yeah, when he starts drinking from the bottle, she literally recedes in the shot.
And he fades in, and David
she's
fades,
literally pushed out, and that's it. And then we get all those cross dissolves of basically what you imagine is the two of them almost seducing each other. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it becomes this seductive kind of dance.
Yeah.
So there is a theory for this. It's called the homosocial triangle.
Okay.
And the idea, and it comes out it's in tons and tons of Gothic literature. In Dracula, very famously, it's there too. But, it's basically the core idea, and a lot of contemporary vampire shows are based on this now as well, which is that you have your vampire, you have your vampire hunter or hero, and you have the woman as bait. The woman is usually the one who is brought in. She links the two together. Maybe she's in peril, maybe she's an acolyte, but she links the two together, and then usually they discard the woman in order to best each other or have each other, whatever way you want to read the story. So, you have this in True Blood. You have this in Buffy, and actually with True Blood and Buffy, you have the same sort of dynamic of the blonde is the sexy tearaway, and the dark-haired one is the strong man of the situation, and the blonde woman is the one who's the intermediary. You have it in Dracula, you have it in lots of them, you know what I mean? So in Lost Boys, it's exactly the same. Star recedes out. She is the normative, heterosexualizing female presence until she's no longer needed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And she's like the only woman amongst them, isn't she? Like the rest of them are boys. It's not a very diverse movie.
No.
It's very white, and it's very. I'd read that the original script, they were all a lot younger.
Yeah.
And so they were about the Sam level ones were supposed to be about 8, and the David and Michael guys were meant to be about 12, 13. So it was all a bit. And Joel Schumacher, when he came on board, he said, because Richard Donner was going to direct it he'd done Goonies. He said I'll come on board if I can make it kind of sexy, really. It's kind of like his idea for it.
I'll executive produce, guys, because I'm going off to actually direct Lethal Weapon. So,
so Richard Donner sort of stepped out. Schumacher came in, made it sexy. And the thing that I found is, so I noticed all this yesterday when I was going through it again, being slightly more worldly, in my mid-40s than I was when I originally watched it. When I originally watched it, I was, a sort of 15, 16-year-old boy in the north of England, straight guy. It never occurred to me that there was that that sort of texture to it. And so then I started like wondering, because obviously mid-80s you think about AIDS, and obviously that is something that kind of features in Near Dark as well, where the vampirism is treated as a pestilence, which there's always hope for a cure, and in Near Dark they do it with transfusions, don't they? And in Lost Boys they do it with like killing the head vampire. But I was trying to get a consistent read on the seeing it as a gay narrative, and with Lost Boys it struggles to get wound up at the end, and because so obviously there's Michael and David have that tussle, and there's like a literal sort of like penetration at the end, and
it's double penetration at the end. There's the antlers heads,
and then David is just at his most beautiful, like angelic sort of like, and Keith Sutherland looks just like spectacular in that shot. And there it all like the whole sort of thing starts to break down, because then all of a sudden they're not vampires anymore, they've all been released from this, and then like, even though like you say, like so the Star and Michael kind of go to each other. Yeah. But there's no real sort of like, that's not the focus of it all. Like then it kind of goes somewhere else, and Grandad's
an old man.
Yeah,
I think it makes complete sense if you don't mind me saying, and it's simply because again we spent too many years thinking about it. But I am there, which is that I don't see, if you take it as a trilogy, okay, just for a moment, and we'll end with Lost Boys, it'll make more sense. Fright Night is about my best friend is gay, and I'm not really sure how to cope with that, especially when my girlfriend won't sleep with me. That's pretty much what's going on there. Evil Ed, when he is transformed in Fright Night, is liberated. For him, it's, he's brought in under Jerry's coat. It's something that, like, no one's going to pick on you anymore. Everything's going to be okay. I see you for who you really are, and it's a wonderful thing.
And he comes out of himself, doesn't he?
He literally, I mean, Stephen Jeffries plays it at 11 already, but I mean, he really goes for it. And there's actually it's been read by some critics, and I would agree with it, as a drag moment where he's got the wig on and he's hiding in the mother's bed and stuff. So there's all of that. And there's very phallic imagery with like the banisters and stuff, which looks like a sort of engorged penis and things like that. So it's all there in Fright Night. But Fright Night is sort of, is more queer friendly than the other two films, I think, simply because, well, obviously you have cast members who are openly queer at that time, and are very, very proud to sort of stand up against the sort of discrimination going on.
Roddy McDowall, wasn't there?
Roddy McDowall, absolutely. But also Amanda Bierce, who I don't think had come out at that point, but had come out soon after.
Right, okay.
And you even have Chris Sarandon, if you go back to Dog Day Afternoon, and he was of course, in that, so playing a man who's trying to get transgender reassignment. So you have a kind of gay legacy kind of baked into the cast there already. When you go to Near Dark, it is about the idea of when you stray from sort of the patriarchal path, you are going to come across people who are going to corrupt you, and literally to cure it, you have to be back and realigned with patriarchal values.
Because his father cures him, doesn't he?
Yeah, because the father's transfusion cures him. And May is asked, does she want to be cured? And she's actually quite unsure. She doesn't know if she wants to be assimilated. And that it ends on that kind of that freeze frame, which is quite uncertain, of her going, does she want to be reassimilated or not? Yeah, and that's into normative culture, for want of a better term.
Yeah, because Near Dark's got a very
ambiguous ending, quite an ambiguous feeling to it.
The characters are all very fringe of society, aren't they? Like extreme non-normative, almost outcasts,
absolutely.
Living on the outside
and
of society.
Loving it as well. They find that liberating, you know what I mean? They don't want to be part of normative society.
Yeah, I always think of Bill Paxton in that movie.
Exactly.
And he's just wild, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So when you get to Lost Boys, even though I know these two of the films have not been made in collaboration in any way, there is this feeling in the culture more generally. By the time you get to Lost Boys, you literally see it as a Brady Bunch narrative, where you've got the normative mother and two sons going to live with a grandfather, and then you have Max and his capitalistic sort of gathering of children in his idea of fusing together this parody of sort of the family values narratives of the 1980s, where bringing families together under patriarchy. So when you get Max killed by the grandfather, it's reasserting that family is more important in some respects than actual kind of like that capitalistic gain that he has over them all. But at the same time, I do feel that it's the threat of homosexuality in the film is the threat needs to be removed. I don't think Michael is in any way queer in the film. I think he's flirting with the idea of it as a rebellious act. He's flirting with it as an idea of maybe understanding himself.
Well, like aesthetically.
That's exactly. Or even the fact that he turns into, remember, a half vampire. He's not a full vampire. You know, he's told you're not a vampire till you make your first kill. Read into that what you will. Maybe you're having your first actual fully fledged sexual experience, whatever that might be. Reading it that way, it's about restoring him to a safe point where he will not be in danger of such things. And that's where the removal of Max, the removal of David, the reconstitution of the family, that saves him.
Yeah, but then at the end that's done by patriarchy as well, isn't it? Because it's
but then I'm not saying it's a perfect lefty movie by any stretch. You know what I mean? I'm just saying that it's the narrative lines kind of fill.
Yeah.
Whereas the other films, I think, are more explicit in their coding about whether it's something to really be afraid of or actually something about discovering about yourself, and maybe you're discovering things about yourself you don't like, as in like maybe I don't feel okay with my best friend being gay or something like that, which I think Charlie does grapple with a little bit in Fright Night. By Lost Boys, it's more like, well, I may have done a thing and maybe I've regretted it, and in the age and narrative of all this other sort of discrimination against people with HIV and AIDS, maybe actually this is something that the film's trying to reconstitute you as sort of, don't do that, that's way too risky. Come back into this narrative fold.
Why would a homosexual director want to include that narrative?
Well, that was something that I was thinking about. Is that all the way through, the visuals are very gay. You know, like the
colouring,
it looks beautiful. You know, like you say, like from the very beginning with Tim Capello. You know, like and like it had that, like it has that incredible, exciting feel that you think of, like the queer explosion. You know, Frankie goes to Hollywood and all that stuff. You know, that's like super exciting disco, and that is all Schumacher, but Schumacher didn't write it.
Exactly. So that's what I was going to say.
It's the whole story through his eyes, you know, and even when the story doesn't behave in the way that he wants it to.
Right,
he
that makes
but
sense.
That's the way that I felt it. And I think it's a much better film for having that tension. And there's a weird thing of repression all the way through. And there is that tension. The tension which I hadn't really understood until you said that Michael is playing at it, you know, or like grappling with something that he's not sure, you know, not quite sure about.
Not sure of himself, I think,
And because so much of the tension comes from that. Because if that tension was released and he was just in love with David, that tension wouldn't be there. You know,
exactly.
And interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
But as it's satirizing it as well. So I would say that even I mean, Schumacher didn't write the script, but I think it's also satirizing this idea of, is the only solution for us to be back in this sort of patriarchal normative family, however dysfunctional it might be, is that really our only solution? And I think, again, you can read those final scenes as something that is satirical as well. It is comedic. I mean, it's not trying to be a desperately serious treatise on anything, but it does end on a laugh that makes you go, oh, we've known about this all along. You know what I mean? So I think there's a satirical edge that gets you out of that worry about it being, you know, a homophobic film. I don't believe the film is homophobic. It does have things in it that are very dated. The language around it. I mean, you know, my brother, the shit-sucking vampire. I mean, you can read things into that, you know, and critics have, and they're very solid readings, I think. But it is, some of it's just dated by that, and some of it does feel like it's a bit more intended to be, you know, kind of mining that coding. So
I mean, it's going to be of its time. You can't escape that, and I think it's not like useful to sort of say, right, I'm not going to watch Lost Boys now because it's film is
like history. It's like documents. You know what I mean? You got to take it as it's indicative of what's going on, not. Yeah, I obviously teaching film, you come across this issue all the time, and it's just like, hang on, you can't impose today's either values or today's ideas on something that's 30, 40, 50 years old. The world was different then. We can attest to that. We remember that.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're watching it with some distance and like.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow that to its sort of absurd conclusion, you end up burning books, don't you? You know, because nothing that's gone before is allowed to be representative. You know, in a society where it's been deemed unfit for whatever reason. But like, I never really feel that like Lost Boys is homophobic, you know, like I don't like
it's innocent, I think.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's difficult because like I only really like saw it with its sort of like LGBTQ plus sort of like undercurrent for the first time.
I think it's got both going on. If I can just, I mean, you know, to kind of put you at ease a little bit, I think it's got both going on, and I think both of those things are part of culture war tensions. Because remember who it's coming from. It's coming from not from Max. It's coming from Sam, and Sam again is more aligned with the sort of MTV fashion victim. Capitalistic narrative that you get that would be very easy for Max to take over, for instance, versus someone who's much more sort of countercultural in his spirit, and that's someone like Michael and to an extent David. So you have these different, you know what I mean, you have this culture war tensions coming out through different characterization.
Yeah, because you wonder, that's just made me think about Michael being counterculture, and then it's sort of like, so him being almost like a proxy for Jim Morrison as representing like the 60s. And then Grandad is obviously from that generation as well, being an old hippie. So you've got that kind of link between the two.
Exactly.
Whereas Sam is a lot more like a child of the 80s. He's got no connection with that 60s-ness. So maybe it's almost like him saying, you know, the 60s kind of had it right and we've gone wrong somewhere as we got to the 80s and the Sam generation.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of that from the 80s is, I don't know if you watched it when you were kids, with Family Ties. If you remember Family Ties TV show, all right, so that was huge, the Michael J. Fox show, but it was absolutely huge in the 80s. And again, that was about the countercultural hippie parents and their Reaganite children and the clash of cultures between the two. And it was very good. Like, it was a really, for the time, it was great. But like, my point is that it's, those generational clashes felt much more pronounced then. But now we've sort of, in this acceleration of culture, we don't see it. I think we forget that, like, you know, 20 years ago, what would a kid of the 2000s look like in comparison to the generation, you know, beneath them today? I think that wouldn't necessarily be as pronounced. A lot happened in a very short period of time, about 25 years in the US, and their culture wars. So, you know,
that is like an absolutely fascinating read on that movie. I didn't know, and I think I said in my email to you, like, I didn't know how deep we'd be able to go in on Lost Boys, but like, I do feel like I've learned something. Just before we wrap up then, Sorcha, what is your favourite modern interpretation of the vampire myth? Yeah, of all of the years of work that you've done, what is the one, let's say, should we say 21st century?
So my favourite example from 21st century vampirism, perhaps?
Yeah.
That's really difficult. I really did like the use of it in something like True Blood, because it was about vampire rights and it was about sort of, you know, representing it that way. And physically, I thought it was quite fun, where their blood could actually be a narcotic. I thought that was actually quite a good reinterpretation of it. Another one, just to kind of give you maybe slightly more what you're looking for, is something like in Let the Right One In, the instability of Ely's body when Ely crosses a threshold and then begins to bleed. I thought that was a really interesting literalization, and it really brought back that rule in vampire studies of, you know, the crossing of thresholds and boundaries by an ownership of space, as in, I own this house, or I own this place. I thought that was such an interesting kind of reinterpretation of it. Silver's kind of fallen away. It's not as, it crops up in one or two of them, and I don't think that one's as interesting a rule. But the boundary one always really kind of struck me as that was exciting to see that come through in the 21st century. So probably that, because it's tied very much to instability of capitalism as well. So
which is one of our favourite topics to talk about. On Vayse.
Me too.
Well, we will definitely have you back then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I have a background in history and politics. That was my degree. So this is where I was applying this to kind of popular culture. Is actually where I got my kicks. So yeah.
We've already done an episode called "Fuck Capitalism," so we should find it.
You need two. Then in 80s style, you need a sequel, and then you need a
capitalism again. A bit. But so we usually ask our guests once we've spoken to them whether they can recommend anything to our listeners which may resonate with them. It can be connected to what we've talked about tonight, and I'm sure for you there'll be quite a lot of vampire stuff that you can recommend, but
sure.
It can just be anything that you think our listeners might like, that might get them sort of like started on the road to living the dream job, like
okay, yeah. Wow, okay. If you want, readability, I think is actually quite important. Something you'll actually want to pick up and enjoy, not to feel that you must trench through something exceedingly difficult or theoretical. I'd always appreciate when someone wants to read Postmodern Vampires, which is the book I wrote on this, and as I say, it took me a very long time, but it's all about connecting the vampire and the American presidency, and how those two things are intertwined, completely since Nixon. So there's that. Nina Auerbach's Our Vampires Ourselves, which I think is so readable and so lyrical and so beautiful, but also is just a fantastic insight into why we need vampires in our lives and what they articulate about the rights of people, the rights of women, the rights of LGBTQI people, and also at the same time the instabilities around masculinity and all that. That's all very much baked into Auerbach's book. A bit more on the fun side, I'm just thinking, you can never really go wrong with some vampire cinema, and I think that if you're looking for vampire film material, my colleague who's in another university, Stacey Abbott, she wrote a fantastic book called Celluloid Vampires, which is about vampires since Dracula to Blade. So that's quite a great book as well. I think the big thing is find your monster, find the thing that works for you. In the last 20 years, since I've basically graduated from university, there's been a glut, in the best sense, of vampire studies, monster studies, teratology, things like that. It's all been there, and it's only getting better. There's a load of us out there who want to talk about pop culture and monsters, so do check it out. And, thinking about monsters are not just things that we need to talk about as humans, but they also represent those things that we sometimes don't have language for yet. So you see a lot of it in terms of, how do I talk about my anxieties about the contemporary age? Maybe there's too much political horror out there for me to cope with it. But if you infuse it down into vampires or into kind of, or zombies or whatever it might be, or biological horror, you will see it there, the traces of it. So, do kind of look back at that stuff and think about what those might mean. Whatever your monster of choice happens to be, you're bound to find something interesting to read about it.
Yeah, I love that. 'Cause, that really sort of crosses over into our sort of territory, especially if you're thinking about something like the Jungian shadow work and that kind of thing, because obviously you're facing dark parts of yourself that you need to personify. There's this thing that Aidan Wachter talks about, feeding your demons. I can't remember who, I've got the book and I can't remember who the practice did it, but basically you allow your demons to take form. And so you set out like two cushions and you move between them, talking to the sort of monster that you created from yourself to sort of give it give it everything that it wants, sort of thing, to sort of like eventually get rid of it, just destroy it, find out what it's all about, and these things. Well, there's way too much to talk about there, but a lot of these things do come from our psyches, don't they? I think that. Sorcha, you're probably on the side where you think that they all come maybe from your psyche, where it's like, I think that we talk about on Vayse quite a lot about whether there is something else that can create monsters like this, but I just think that exactly what you said, that by sort of like giving significance to monsters like in society, but also within yourself, you can learn way more about the times that we're living in. And again, that's where it crosses over with pop culture. Again, like the idea of the monsters that are predominant at any particular time will tell you so much about the culture and its fears and the worries and stuff.
And just to say, monsters are not always negative in connotation as well. I mean, I've got colleagues who've done studies on, monstrosity as actually something that is very empowering to certain groups as well. That they've seen within monstrosity something relatable, empowering, particularly if they're operating or living outside of the normative culture. Yeah. So, there's Heather Petrocelli wrote a fantastic PhD with us and became a book since called Queer for Fear, which was all about this idea of identification with monsters as something innately positive in a world that sees them as something to be hunted. So you can see that there's this normative kind of sense of being overwhelmed and living outside of that within the kind of realm of whether it's Frankenstein's creature bolted together as, but parts of identity bolted together to kind of look like a formation of or an echo of normative culture, but actually is not, or whether it's about, proletarian belonging, in an age of, sort of mass production. You can read it whichever way you want to, but she found that a lot of their subjects of their study related to monsters as something beautiful, sexual, exciting, and actually empowering. So it's not always a negative shadow. Sometimes it's actually quite a positive thing as well. And I'm sorry, of all things, of course I'd want to be a vampire. Of course I would. I'm not going to opt for the zombie. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to try
vampires,
and think.
Yeah. Good hygiene. And especially an 80s Lost Boys vampire. Yeah,
that's the era I'm going to lean into.
Era,
that's what if I had a choice,
I don't like where they went after that.
No.
After that, it got a bit too clean and sterile, and I like the grotty kind of.
Well, the Lost Boys definitely look like they've been out in a club for a couple of nights. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've definitely been out, late night clubbing somewhere. Whereas I get you in terms of the 90s, more historically informed, beautiful costuming. You're into the vampire and whatnot. You know what I mean? Yes, there's some grimy ones in the 90s, but they tend to be more New York grimy, like they've been hanging around the West Village too long. So it's there's a vampire for all of us. That's the joy of it, really. So,
yes.
You just have to put on the good soundtrack, just to remind the 80s one is probably one of the better soundtracks.
Beautiful. And where can our listeners find your work and find you online and that kind of thing? Well,
you can find me online. I'm still on X you can find me there at Vampire Sorcha. I'm on Instagram. Not massively successfully, but I am there on Instagram at Vampire Sorcha. And you will find there's listings of things that we do in the Manchester Centre for Gothic Studies online at MMU, and the Pop Screen Cultures Research Network, which looks at contemporary popular cinema across the world. I tend to focus mostly on the United States, but it is with a core research members from across the world. So you can find me there. I'm doing lots of sort of public engagement material in the next few months. I'm doing some work at Hearthon in Ireland this year for the Clive Barker 30th anniversary of Lord of Illusions, but there's also other events as well. You'll find me online. I'm always knocking about doing stuff.
Amazing, thank you very much. And if anyone out there wants to hear more Vayse, if you've stumbled across us because you love vampires or you love Sorcha, then you can find us. We're also on X, although we don't use it as much anymore. We're also on Instagram, and that's at Vayse, and then Vayse spelled backwards, so that's at VAYSEESYAV. We are on Blue Sky, but I can't remember. Just look
I
at
am
Vayse
also on
that.
Blue Sky. Yeah. Yes, I'm there somewhere.
They have long names that I can't remember.
That's why I can't remember. It hasn't gone into my brain, but I am there. You will find me. Yeah.
You've got quite a unique name, so
I do, for better or worse.
Vampires Sorcha will be something people can find.
You will find me there.
And you can hear our episodes on www.vayse.co.uk. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, but it's only on the website, you can get the full show notes, and you can email us at baseinfo@gmail.com. If there's anything you'd like to talk to us about, or if you have any suggestions for the show, you can get us there. The soundtrack is on Bandcamp, all by Mr. Stephen James Buckley himself there. And you can join our Ko-Fi, and if you join our Ko-Fi, you get access to our Discord, which is a lovely place. And I think that's, I've been a lot of practice with that. I'm rusty. I used to be able to just reel that off without thinking.
It used to be smooth, man. It used to be smooth.
It used to be smooth, yeah. Now I'm all over the place.
I might have to start doing it.
Thank you very much,
thank you.
Sorcha, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been such a great chat. You really have made me think. And
that's great.
That is absolutely fantastic. Because I'm never going to watch Lost Boys the same after that.
Oh, good.
I am going to revisit it soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's always interesting when a lot of the people we interview are part of a loosely the same world in terms of they're all on the same podcasts, and we've heard them on this podcast, we've heard them on that podcast, and it's all like, I won't say incestuous, but there's quite a lot of cross-pollination goes on between podcasts that are similar to us. And whenever there's someone who's outside of that, it's always a bit nerve-wracking. It's like, is this going to work? And with you, it worked amazingly. So you're just you're super cool. You're one of our kinds of people.
Yeah, it's great when we find someone from outside of that sort of group that we sort of can talk to like that, because it's just really exciting.
In the words of David the Vampire,
this is true.
You're one of us. As I said, do we ever find out his surname?
Yeah,
I think it's just the Vampire.
It is. No, I know. Hang on, it's in my head.
Is that something from the novelization?
It's on the milk carton poster of his face.
Oh, is there a milk carton poster?
Yeah, it was
well?
one of the kind of things that came out afterwards. I'm just trying to see it in my mind's eye.
Oh, right, okay.
It's not white, but it's something like white. It's quite a normal
Do you want me to
name.
Google
Yeah, I'm
it?
gonna have to can't see it fully in my mind's eye. Usually I'm boom like that, but
I'm on it.
Yeah, I think it's David.
Lost Boys. Okay, so the top thing that comes up when I Google Lost Boys is, why is the Lost Boys such a good
There you go.
I think we might have got close to answering that today.
Because it is. It's rewatchability as well. It's so rewatchable, so quotable.
Yeah.
You know.
It's it just says David on the Wikipedia. It doesn't say David like It's just as David.
David Williams. Well, I've got it here from this Reddit. I don't know how accurate that is. David Williams. That doesn't sound right. But then Marco Thompson. Yeah. David Lost.
Because I know it says Michael Edmondson, doesn't it?
Michael Emerson.
Emerson, yeah.
Emerson, which again is a reference back to Emerson and Waldo Emerson.
It says David's last name in Lost Boys is definitely not canon. The sources list him as David Powers.
Powers, that's it. Yeah. I knew it was something.
That's a bit on the nose,
Irish,
isn't it?
That's a common Irish surname. You see, Powers.
Oh, is
so
it?
That's why my brain went, oh yeah, but no.
It's interesting.
I didn't.
Because,
That's canon or not. I didn't cite it in the book. I just cited it as David because David.
Yeah, it's interesting. They follow the vampires. You find out where the power is.
You do quite literally. Yeah. But it might be hangover from the novelization by Craig Gardner Shaw.
Yeah,
who also did loads of those 80s movies. It's very, it's not subtle. Bless. But it is written out of the script. So whatever draft of the script he was given, that's what it's written out of, essentially.
Is it quite horny?
It's a little bit queer. It's a little bit, especially the tussling scene. It's kind of, he's going to get control me kind of thing. You're like, oh wow. Give it 20 years, it'll be described as a kink. You know what I mean? So so it's not kink shaming, but there you are. So
whatever floats your boat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not yucking anyone's
I have
yum.
a final question. A final question to pose to the group. We can all discuss this. What's everyone's favourite Corey Feldman film?
Oh, Corey.
Now that is a tough question.
I think it's
isn't it?
Lost Boys. I mean, I do love the Goonies.
He's very good in the Goonies as mouth.
But like Lost Boys. I mean, Gremlins is an
Stand
excellent
by
movie.
Me.
Or
I mean,
License
Goonies,
to
Lost
Drive.
Boys, Gremlins,
Do you remember
Stand By Me.
License
I've
to
not
Drive?
seen License to Drive. I've been here because that's a two Corys movie.
That is
isn't
a two Corey
Yeah.
special. Yeah.
And the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
Yeah,
yeah, I'd forgotten.
that
And
didn't do it for
he-
me the way it did for other people. I know my husband loves that stuff.
He even did the third one.
Oh, God.
Like when the
They
franchise
went
was
to
just like
Tokyo, isn't it?
No, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
I
they
only
do,
watched
yeah,
the
they
first
go to
two, but like
medieval-
all of the actors had gone by that point. And it was
Everyone
just
had
Feldman
quit. The
still-
director, the writer,
still-
everyone had left.
Yeah,
It's like
still,
Feldman's there like the last
And
one at
Corey,
the
of course,
party.
did
You
the
just won't
sequels,
give up.
didn't he? He did Lost Boys 2, The Tribe, and whatever the third one is called. He's in those as well.
I saw the second one, and I must have fallen asleep or something. I never got to watch the third, but I think that's more about the Frog Brothers, isn't it? The third one.
Yeah.
No, I've not. Is it?
But I don't even know if
should we just
Jamison
not talk
Newlander
about
came
them?
back, did he? I mean, the other
I
Frog
don't
brother.
think he has a lot else going on. So like,
Yeah.
I'd rather not know they exist.
Oh,
I just
I'm
put
very
my-
much a la 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 la. It's not a trilogy. Yeah.
But this is one of the
Yeah.
things that's weird that I just can't understand is that like it's so ripe for a franchise. How could they have fucked it up that badly? Because they could have done.
I think
like,
that's why it's so great, though, because if you
Yeah.
notice the things that you love that
Yeah.
are not made into trilogies or are not franchised out beyond the original creator's control, they tend to
Yeah.
stay rather pure in our hearts. You
Back
know?
to the Future.
Like the Goonies.
Yeah, like your Goonies.
Labyrinth.
Yeah, even like Gremlins. I mean, Joe Dante. I mean, I know Chris Columbus, Joe Dante, but it feels still fairly contained.
The second Gremlins was insane, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good fun.
yeah.
It was.
But that's
but,
why I'm
like-
so happy that like Back to the Future's never been remade because
And
they
it
always
never will
threaten
be.
it.
Yeah.
And
so-
it never will be. That's the great
Um,
thing. Like, I mean, basically, the two Bobs are like, nope, it's written into their contract. This is a contract you'd never get nowadays in Hollywood anyway.
Yeah.
You can't have it in terms of its story outside of the creators, and the two of them have sign-off power on that. So
Perfect.
that's it.
I mean,
I can sleep better tonight.
Yeah. I sleep all the time knowing that they're not going to make Back to the Future 4, so it's fine. You know?
I think I'm going to have to go with the Goonies.
That's a good choice. I mean, that's a very good choice.
Simply because I think if I had, although I'm really, really torn.
Oh, I've got my favourite. It came to me there. Sorry, yeah.
The Goonies is the one that I've watched the most, I think, followed by Lost Boys.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to have to go. It's a tough choice because I think The Lost Boys is a film that I probably enjoy more now.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to have to go with the Goonies. I think I'm going to be true to my
Be true to thine old self. Be
8-year-old
true.
self.
Steve.
Goonies never die.
Thank you.
Goonies never die.
Goonies
But it's
never
not
die.
my choice.
So what about you two?
Go on, you go, Peter.
I don't know. I'll go to you, Circa, because
Okay.
I don't know.
So I was in my brain going, you've got a favourite. What is it? What is it? What is it? I mean, he's gotten so many great roles. My favourite Corey Feldman performance and film is from The Burbs.
Oh,
Because
shit, yeah.
you've got that great moment at the end when he turns to camera and he says, God, I love this street, and he walks away. It's fantastic. He's just this loser
Very
guy
Feldman.
who ends up having a block party while the whole place is falling down around him. It's great. I love it.
I've not seen that in years. It used to be on like
Channel 5 and places like that in the
Channel 5,
afternoons.
like,
Yeah.
every.
It's got my
it was
favourite
on
era
Channel
of
5,
Tom
like,
Hanks in it.
once a
Yeah,
week.
the non-serious Tom
Yeah.
Hanks, the pre-Castaway,
But
the
also slightly
pre-Philadelphia.
neurotic Tom Hanks.
Yeah,
he
I like
is
that,
definitely
though.
nervous breakdown Tom Hanks.
Oh yeah,
you know?
yeah, which is a good
Yeah,
stage
it's good.
for it.
It's a good one, you know.
MBTA.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Stand By Me. I think I have to.
Great movie.
Strong choice.
And it's a bit more of a nuanced performance for a Feldman. You feel genuine sympathy for the kid.
Yeah.
Which
I think he'd not maybe discovered cocaine yet.
yeah,
At that point, he was a bit less
mouth.
Yeah.
famous.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
definitely by the time he was doing The Burbs, he was on all the substances, and they were like very able to do so there's a lot of interesting sort of connections there between Corey Feldman before he did the Corey.
Vayse.